Hello, everyone. We are coming to you today from cold but beautiful Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I am Reverend Ed Tansey, and along with Reverend George Stewart, otherwise known as Reverend G, we are the spiritual leaders and founders of this wonderful community out here. So we invite you to go to our website, cslboston.org, to find out more about our community and how it can support you and how you can support us. So today, the CSL yearly theme for 2018 is 100 Years of Science of Mind. And March's theme is You Are Rooted in the Divine. Yes, you are rooted in the divine. And today's talk is entitled, as the curtain opens, The Highest and Best is Your Personal Self. So looking at this month's theme, you are rooted in the divine. To me, that means life is always happening, or goes from the invisible, or our thoughts and our beliefs, to the visible of what manifests in our experience. Everything that manifests in form comes from thought. It begins with thought. And as we know, it's the thoughts that we give focus to, the thoughts that we pay attention to, the thoughts that we attach our emotions to are the thoughts that show up in our outer experience. Now, all the other thoughts that we have, and we have millions of thoughts, come in and out of our lives, come in and out of our experience, not experience, really, in and out of our head. Poof. The ones you don't pay attention to, they just float away. So it's very important to remember, even though we have millions of thoughts, it's the ones that we focus on that manifest. Those are the ones we experience. So again, life that which begins in the invisible and then goes to the visible manifestation, I believe is so tied to faith and belief. Faith and belief. So could you say that then belief is the vehicle? Think about this. Belief is the vehicle, and faith is the road that creates our lives. Take that home and think about that during the week. Okay? Belief is the vehicle, and faith is the road that creates our life. So, if you remember last week, I pointed out a few of the definitions of belief. I just want to quickly say them. One, something that is accepted, considered to be true, or held as an opinion. Something believed. And the second one was conviction of the truth of some statement or the reality of some being or phenomenon, especially when based on examination of evidence. So again, it's important to remember that our beliefs have such significant influence on what is outpictured here and what we experience in our individual lives. And also remember this, as Jesus said in the law of belief, it is done unto you as you believe, or as you believe, it is done unto you. Now, last week I mentioned and talked about faith. And again, faith was a firm belief in something for which there is no proof, something that is believed, especially with a very strong conviction. Believed with a strong conviction. And the other thing I mentioned last week was that faith is an unconditional acceptance that there is invisible intelligence that guides. And this invisible law that controls is doing so right now in everyone's life. So you see, faith is the substance that is hoped for It is the evidence of things unseen, and it is the substance, or it is the substance that is realized in the invisible, that manifests in visible form. Those were a lot of words to say that, but hopefully you got the grasp of that. Now, this morning, in our spiritual practices that I really want to share with you that I had no idea I was going to, we always open to a page in Creative Ideas and read it. And this is what showed up this morning, and I just said, oh, I want to read that. So I'm going to. That's on page 36, and it said, I ask in faith and receive. Ask and ye shall receive. That was from John chapter 16, verse 24. And it reads as follows. This is one of the most wonderful statements ever uttered. It implies that there is a power which can and will honor your request. But it is only as you let go of the lesser that you can take hold of the greater. Only as you drop confusion that you can entertain peace. Only as you transcend doubt and fear that you can be lifted up to the hilltops of the inner life. In asking, you must identify yourself with the greatness of spirit. Permit your consciousness, through faith, to rise to a greater and broader realization of that divine presence, which is always delivering itself to you. That just moved me this morning, and I wanted to share it. So, with all of that being said, here is a story that I want to share with you. It's about a little girl who was 8 years old, who went by the name of Tess. And when she was 8, she heard her mother and father talk about her younger brother, Andrew. Now, all Tess knew was that Andrew was very, very sick, and that her parents were completely out of money. They actually had to move out of their apartment complex. They had to move out of their apartment complex in the month that was coming because her dad didn't have enough money for both the doctor bills and his obligation of the house payment. Because the only thing left to save little Andrew was a very expensive and costly surgery. And it looked to the parents that there was no one who could assist, no one who could offer help, offer a loan, etc. And what Tess remembered her mother and father saying at 8, and I quote this, only a miracle can save him now. This is what she heard. So when she heard that, this little 8-year-old girl immediately went into action. She ran to her bedroom. She took down from a top shelf that was her hiding place a jelly jar that had money in it. And she poured all the money out on the floor because she knew that she had to count how much money she had, and she had to be exactly correct because she knew at this point that there was no chance for her to make a mistake. She was very, very sure on that. So once she counted the money, she carefully placed it back into the jar, put the cap on real tight, and then this 8-year-old girl left the house and ran 6 blocks to a Rexall drugstore. Now, does anyone remember about the Rexall drugstores? Now, those are the stores that had the big Indian chief out in front. Boy, if that doesn't date me, I'll tell you, boy. Does anyone remember that? Please, do I see a hand? Oh, I see 2 hands. Thank you. I'm not as vintage as I think. But so she ran to that drugstore, and she ran to the back where the pharmacist was, and she patiently waited because he was in a very intent conversation with this man. And really, he didn't have time, this was the appearance, to bother with an 8-year-old girl. So again, here's little Tess waiting and waiting, and he wasn't paying any attention. So after a while, she got a little, antsy, and she made the most horrid, disgusting sound she could as she was clearing her voice to get this man's attention. Nothing happened, and she's waiting and waiting. And what she finally did is, out of her job, her jelly job, that she so saved her money, got a quarter and slammed it on the counter. And that got his attention. Now, he looked at the little girl, and in a voice that was like full of annoyance, he said, "What do you want?" But he didn't give Tess time to answer. He then said, "I'm talking to my brother from Chicago, and I am in this deep conversation. And I haven't seen him in years." Then Tess said, "I want to talk to you about my brother." And in that same kind of voice that he used on her, she was a smart little kid, she used it on him and said, "He's really sick, and I want to buy him a miracle." Now the pharmacist looked at her. "I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon?" Didn't stop her. She said, "His name is Andrew, and he has something really bad growing inside his head. And I heard my daddy say to my mommy that only a miracle could help. So how much does a miracle cost?" Now at this point, the pharmacist kind of softened. And he said to her in a softer way, "We don't sell miracles here, little girl. We don't. And I'm sorry, but I really can't help you." There goes Tess, and she said, "Listen, I have the money to pay for it. And if it isn't enough, I will get whatever the surgery will cost." Now at this point, the man who the pharmacist was talking to, his brother, stooped down and and asked Tess, "Tess, what kind of miracle does your brother need?" And at that point, little Tess' eyes, they began to really well up. And she said, "I don't know. I don't know. I just know he's really, really sick, and Mommy says he needs an operation, but Daddy can't afford to pay for it. So I want to use my money. I want to use my money." The pharmacist's brother said and asked the little girl, "Well, how much do you have?" And very proudly, little Tess said, $1.11. "I have that, but again, if it costs more, I'll get it." Imagine, she said that. "I'll get it." Well, the man looked at her, and he said, "That's exactly how much a miracle costs for a little brother. Would you take me to where you live? I want to see your brother, and I want to meet your parents. And let's see if I have the kind of miracle that you need." You see, this pharmacist's brother was Dr. Carlton Armstrong. Have you ever heard of his name? Well, he was a surgeon. He was a surgeon from Chicago whose specialty was neurosurgery. This is a true story. The operation was completed for Andrew without any cost, and in no time, Andrew was home doing well. And later, Tess heard her mom and dad speaking about the events that led up to this happening, this occurrence. And her mother said, "That surgery was a real miracle. I wonder how much it cost." And Tess smiled. She knew exactly how much it cost. $1.11. So you see, well, I mean, when I even think of that, my eyes fill, $1.11. So it was Tess's belief, her belief in that a miracle would save her brother's life, and that she had faith in knowing that this would be so. A miracle would happen, she would have the money to pay for the miracle, and her brother would be fine. She believed this. So when you have faith, people, when you have faith, we shall see the evidence that our faith produces real, tangible results. You see, what Tess so desired because of her faith, knowing that it would manifest, it did manifest. So I want to end my part of the talk today with a quote from Living the Science of Mind from Ernest Holmes. The God within you creates every circumstance and situation you have ever experienced. You have called these circumstances and situations things in themselves, but they have never been. They have always been the fruition of your thoughts, and your thoughts have been dominated by your belief in God ever since you have had self-conscious life. Namaste. Did you like that story?
Yes.
Touched me. Touched me.
I believe that's your quote.
Oh, that is my quote. Well, there's my quote.
So there you go.
I'm sorry, I said the quote.
You'll see it on Facebook
Yeah,
later.
you see it on Facebook. Lovely background.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Well, wait a second.
You want to read it again?
Okay, Mike, maybe read it.
Read it again?
Just
I would be happy
Go
to.
ahead, Rev G. I'm done.
The God within you creates every circumstance and situation you have ever experienced. You have called these circumstances and situations things in themselves, but they have never been. They have always been the fruition of your thought, and your thought has been dominated by your belief in God ever since you have had self-conscious life.
read it again, please.
You want to read it again?
Yes.
All right, we will read it again. God within you creates every circumstance and situation you have ever experienced. You have called these circumstances and situations things in themselves, but they have never been. They have always been the fruition of your thought, and your thought has been dominated by your belief in God ever since you have had self-conscious life. It's a powerful message.
It is.
Ernest is telling us something here. So I want to thank you, Reverend Ed, for your lovely message. And it reminds me and helps me remember when I was a kid and I had infinite faith in miracles. Does anybody remember that when you were a kid? And everything seemed like a miracle, right? And then we got older and we started to forget all that. We started to let all that go. Because human reality told us we need to forget those things, right? Because miracles are only grand and glorious things. They're not the breath you just took. And yet, it is the breath you just took. It is all those things. And I am so, so grateful that I found this teaching, because that's what brought me to realize miracles again and to see miracles in everything. You know, Ernest is always reminding us that miracles are everywhere and that we have the ability to bring them forward into our reality. And that's what it's all about. So I want to talk about my dad, because my father was one of those people of his times who wasn't really very demonstrative about being loving, especially to his sons. And And for me, I needed more, or I felt I needed more as a kid. But he gave the best that he could, and I know that. So it was interesting that it was after he left this earthly plane that I actually knew the love that he had for me. It wasn't when he was alive, it was when he left this reality, when he transitioned. Because when he transitioned, it was at a time when I was in flux. I'm going to say I was like, my gayness was like a revolving door at that time. I was in and out of the closet more times than I can even state. And at that time, I made a realization. And he was moving in that direction where I knew he was going to be transitioning. I knew that he would be leaving us. And I had finally realized, it's like, who am I fooling? Who's zooming who, right? Who's fooling who? I was fooling myself into believing that I was something other than being a gay man. And so I finally, at that point, decided to really take that on and realize this is who I am, this is where my life is going, and this is it. I'm not playing the games. I'm not changing for what society believed I needed to change. I'm not changing any of that. I am being who I was here meant to be. And when I did that, it was not long after that my dad made his transition. That was his way of making sure. My other brothers were married. They were in happy relationships. But I was the only one that hadn't really settled into anything as a kid. So at this point in my life, he made his transition, and that was his way of saying, I wanted to make sure you were okay, George. I wanted to make sure that you're in the right place for yourself. And it was so clear to me. That moment came to me so clearly. So it was really a beautiful time. It was a time that was just so powerful in my life. And I felt more love from my dad than I had ever felt all of my life as a kid. And realized how much he loved me. So it was a very powerful thing. Something else that my dad did for me is he gave me a gift. Because my dad was more of a spiritual man than a religious man. My mother was very religious. My father was more spiritual. My mother was a Presbyterian fundamentalist. My dad was a Christian Scientist. So I suppose those things read into what I became. And so what that did for me is it sent me on a journey. I needed to find out. I needed to meet the God of my understanding. And that's what brought me to religious science, to the science of mind philosophy, because that's where I met the God of my understanding. This God that was the kind of God my father had made a part of his life, and had somehow relayed that to me. So it was really wonderful. So, this quest, I think Ernest speaks of here, or this God of our understanding he speaks of in the following quote. And we worship the God whom we believe in rather than the God who is. I'm going to stop right there. Worshiping the God that we believe in rather than the God who is. Because the God who is in and as and through everything, right? But when we say we're worshiping God, if I believe in God, I'm putting it outside of me. So it's important to realize that. So, but there is nothing wrong about this, since the God who is believed in is at times some part of the God who is. Because, right? There is no place, there is no spot where God is not. It's everywhere present. So even if I just believe in it, as though it was outside of me, I still have the power to make that God a reality in my life. Therefore, whatever God you believe in, provided you believe this God is already in you, that the God is already in you, that's the magic realization. That's the magic realization. Provided you believe this God is already in you, must respond to you at the level of your belief. This is why it is done unto each of us as we believe. The principle is infallible. The practice is what we make of it. So for me, it's very powerful. What Ernest is trying to tell us here is that, we can believe in God, which puts it outside of us, or we can have a belief of God. And when I say I have a belief of God, it's within me. I have the belief of God, as though I am the I am that I am. So it's very powerful to realize how important this reality or this understanding is, because that's what we do here. We believe of God. We don't believe in God. We believe of God. We believe that God is all that we are, but God is also all that each and every person in our life is as well. I see the God all around this room. I see the divinity that is absolutely present in everything. And when I have trouble with that, that's when I have to work a little harder to see the God, especially in those situations that put us in a place of being out of balance. So it's real important to realize that. So this leads us to that God within. And that God within that we say God is all there is, because that's what we say a lot around here. I am made of God's stuff. And not only am I made of God's stuff, everyone in this room is, and all throughout the cosmos are made of this God stuff. Even those people who we find it hard to believe they're made of God's stuff are made of God's stuff. And everyone is magnificent. This is an important realization. You know, we talk about the global vision of CSL being, a world that works for everyone. But the beginning of that is awakening humanity to their magnificence, which then creates a world that works for everyone in all of creation. Awakening humanity to their magnificence. We are already magnificent, but we have to awaken ourselves to it. And so my job is, when I see people who aren't in their magnificence, is to see that magnificence, is to know that magnificence, right? And it's hard. I'm not going to say it's not sometimes, but it's okay. I take it a step at a time, and sometimes I have to stop and breathe into that. So, Ernest further talks about this in this quote, which I think just so beautifully talks about the magnificence of who we are. So since the mind within you is the mind of God, and God's magnificent, right? Okay? And since the mind of God has been in all people, so everyone is magnificent, right? It follows that the intelligence within you understands what the great of the earth have been talking about. He's talking about the mystics. The mystics have always told us these things, but we haven't always listened. So you already have within you an understanding, a comprehending mind. The mind of God has no problems, no difficulties, and is never confused. When you know that the mind within you is God and cannot be confused, then your intellect becomes clarified. So what's he talking to us about here? He's telling us that we are the mind of God. That we use this mind collectively, together. And we have the power to draw on that mind. And so it's so important to realize that. And to realize that everyone that I see is that same magnificent energy. Even those people who push my buttons. I have to see the magnificence in all things. In Science of Mind, we have 10 core concepts, and one of those core concepts is core concept 10, which is the realization of the Christ or cosmic consciousness. Now, when I spoke of mystics, to me, Jesus or Christ was a mystic and brought us amazing messages of truth that we can use. But there are so many different mystics in the world, and it brought us some amazing teachings, the Buddha. So there's all kinds of things out there. The Hindus have all kinds, they have 300,000 gods or something like that. So, but they all bring something wonderful. And the mystical teachings are what, Sufism is another mystical teaching that I love. That there's Taoism, there's so many different mystical and beautiful belief systems, but they all tell us the same thing. They all tell us to do unto others as we would have done unto us. So this Christ consciousness that we're talking about This is our realization of our oneness with divinity and with all of life. When we are in that place, we're like Tess. She believed she could buy a miracle, right? And we can do that when we get into that place. The Christ consciousness is being in alignment with the divinity of who we are and realizing that. Now in the Bible, in 2 Corinthians 5, verses 16 to 9, this gives us a really clear, to me this is very clear, clarifying for me as to the Christ consciousness and what it means. From now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. So what do you think they're saying in that first line? From a worldly point of view.
We don't look outside.
Appearances, exactly. Not looking outside of ourselves. A worldly point of view. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Though we once regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. So they don't even get that. So they're talking to the Corinthians in this. That's the second letter to the Corinthians. But they're talking to the Corinthians, telling them this. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. So again, we're going back to that Christ consciousness. If I'm in that Christ consciousness, the new creation is coming through me. I am the channel through which it comes. The old has gone, the new is here. So let go of the old stuff that doesn't serve you. Accept the new and the good and the right in your life. That's what that's about. So all of this is from God, who reconciled us to itself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. What am I doing when I'm reconciling? I'm getting myself into alignment. Am I not? So I'm reconciling myself with the true divinity of who I am. And that's what it's about. It's getting into that reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. Did anybody see what I put on Facebook about sins? Self-inflicted nonsense. That's Eric Butterworth's definition of sins. Self-inflicted nonsense. So people's sins against them. So it's like that. They don't count. They're not important. So, and he was committed to us, and he has committed to us a message of reconciliation, reminding us, where am I in the world? Am I showing up in separation, or am I showing up in alignment? Now, am I in Christ consciousness all the time? No. No. But it's okay. Because I always have the opportunity to realize that I can be at any moment. I can pull myself into that reality. So I'd like to conclude today. As we move into this month of being rooted in the divine, which I think is a really awesome consciousness to take for this month, to be rooted in the divine, to really connect ourselves with that. We can begin by having the innocence of Tess. Would you agree with me? Mm-hmm. If I can be in that place of innocence, of knowing I can buy a miracle for $1.11. And you can, right? Because the divine doesn't know the difference between large and small. We are the ones who limit that. So remember that you have this as your divine inheritance. All the good in the universe is yours. And you just have to work on the alignment with it. That's your work. You have the life of your dream already within you. So let it out. Let it out. Let your dream out. And does that mean you let your dream out before the people who may say, well, that's crazy, that'll never happen? No, we let our dreams out to those people that we know will support us and lift us in that. So that's the important thing, to be in that place. So join me this month in remembering we are individualized expressions of God, the universe, or the divine, or whatever name you use for your higher power. Doesn't matter to me. Therefore, we are heirs with all of the rights and privileges. I love this when we were at the convention and they were giving people their honorary doctorates, and they were saying, this bestows upon you all of the rights and privileges of a doctoral degree. And it was so nice to see that. It's like we have all the rights and privileges. Each and every one of us does. So accept those rights and privileges as your truth right now. Because you are full of infinite possibilities. Accept those. Namaste. And so I'd like to move into prayer. So just getting comfortable. Relaxing, closing your eyes if you're comfortable. And just centering. Centering and relaxing into this moment. Realizing and recognizing that there is one infinite, absolute possibility. One universal good. One perfect whole and complete presence. This presence I call the Mother, Father, God, but I know it answers to so many names. Love, creativity, infinite light, Christ consciousness, Allah, Buddha, the Tao. It is unimportant the name, it is the realization and the recognition of this one and infinite universal power that is important. And I realize that I am one with it, for I am made of all of this source, all of this substance, all of this creativity, all of this good, that every part of my being is infinite possibilities. And as I know this for myself, I know that for each one here in the sanctuary, each one on Facebook Live and all throughout the cosmos, for there is only oneness. And I align myself with that oneness right here and right now, remembering who and whose I am. That I am an individualized expression of this universal infinite good. And I know that for all, each life that I touch, each individual that I see. And it is from this place of oneness that I call forth right here and right now a miracle in each life now. I declare it and I claim it. For I know that the divine good is absolutely here in this moment and is revealing a beautiful miracle in each life right now in this moment. Breathe in that miracle. And as you breathe out, breathe the miracle out into the world, knowing it is safe. I recognize and I realize that this infinite good is absolutely revealed right here and right now with each one. And that alignment with the divine in moments of separation becomes gentle and easy for each one. That each one can move into that place, that recognition of the divinity of who each one is. And so I am grateful as I know this gift is already given. This is already done. It is the Father, Mother, God's good pleasure to give the kingdom right here and right now. And I declare and I claim this kingdom for each one. Knowing it is good and very good, I simply allow it to be. I release it into infinite activity of the law. The alchemy of the divine reality that brings it into form. And letting go, I know this or something even better is manifest in this moment. And so I say, blessed be, Amen, Ashe. And together we say, and so it is.